I'm here today with Hayden Cardiff, founder and chief innovation officer of Idelic. Hayden, thank you so much for doing this. Greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely, Doug. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. The topic this year that I'm working on is AI trucking defense. And with your background and what you've done with Idelic, nobody better to help us with a number of these issues and give us the background. One of the big things on this that I find, Hayden, particularly myself, the nuance between machine learning, generative AI. Can you help us with that from your technology standpoint?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a big one. We hear about AI so much today. It's such a huge topic. It's incredibly buzzy, and we can't even get through a commercial of the Super Bowl without getting AI thrown at us, right? Like
Yeah.
it is so it is so ingrained into our world today that oftentimes we lose a little bit of the sense of exactly what is it and what do we
Right.
mean when we talk about AI. And
Yeah.
so even in today's world of trucking technology and safety and operations, AI gets used a lot in so many different scenarios. So it's important to understand some of the nuance around that. So when we hear AI a lot of times today, especially in our daily lives, we think of that generative AI. Think Chat GPT, Gemini, Claude, things like that, where it's essentially taking a massive bank of English language and you ask it a question and then it searches that, that massive bank, that pool of essentially understanding context to draft and create something that mimics what it's seen before, right? So I can go on and say, hey, help me with a party plan for my 10-year-old's birthday party.
Yeah.
And it would go through and look at literally just an enormous amount of data across the internet and say, hey, here are all the things that I've seen about party planning, maybe party planning for a child's birthday. And it would pull together what it's seen across all of this and then generate something for you. And for you, it looks like magic. For you, it looks like, man, they have just created this amazing plan. It's got wonderful games and party favors and things like that. But ultimately, it's just curating what others
Mhm.
have created in the past, right? And this is terrific for efficiency gain, and it is incredibly helpful for us to be able to get through our daily tasks much faster, right? Now, there's obviously the need for human intervention to look at that, course correct, and see, like, does this exactly fit my need? Is it exactly what I'm looking for? But it's a great place to start. Now, the difference between that and something like machine learning or predictive analytics is that's looking at a massive pool of data. And it's using that historical data of exactly what has happened in the past to then predict known outcomes that have been correlated to those different pieces in the future. So what does this look like, right? This is a good example of Amazon coming and saying, hey, because you have this behavior and you have this demographic and you have this, a buying profile, actual hard facts and data about you, we know that others who look like you have also bought these things because we have that specific data. And so we can take this known behavior, track it in mass to known outcomes, and then look at you, Doug, and say, hey, you fit this profile because of your historical data. So I'm going to suggest to you buying these things because I know that you have a higher propensity to buy these things because we've seen it in the past. And so it is similar but nuanced and different because it's important to understand in that generative AI side of things, it's essentially looking at what others have done and curated in the past. It could be right or wrong.
Right.
And a lot of times, I think any of us who have used ChatGPT and others, like there are things that it creates that are just objectively wrong at times. For the most part, it's very good, but you have to double check that, right? And it's because it's pulling from human creation, right? To then replicate that for us in a faster, easier, and more effective manner. The predictive analytics is looking at hard facts, hard data, and it's saying what are the actual outcomes that have come from this, and we can use that to predict with a high degree of accuracy what's coming. So
Now,
like it's
moving.
pretty, yeah, it's pretty interesting nuance there.
Yeah. Now, moving from Amazon, or I think of the Netflix, hey, how'd you know I wanted to see that movie kind of context.
Exactly.
But you apply it to the world you and I are in, trucking, and
Yep.
particularly risk. The predictive analytics for risk, Hayden, how does that work and where's that drawn from?
Yeah, that's a great question, because this is where obviously for us in our arena, it becomes super interesting, because we can now look at questions and problems that we have to face on a daily basis and say, how can we use historical data to be very prescriptive in how we use our time? So for example, as a safety manager or as a risk manager, like our job is to understand the data that's at hand, the behaviors of our drivers, look at who we have within our fleet, and it's our job to be able to spend our time in coaching and guiding and engaging with those drivers as best as possible to help them get home safely. It's our job to make sure that we're coaching the right drivers at the right time. We're highlighting the right behaviors in which they're exhibiting some issues, and then we are helping them course correct before accidents happen, right? That's the goal.
Right.
Now, tools today, when it comes to like industry standard process, oftentimes lends to being a little bit reactive, right? I have my camera telematics, which is phenomenal technology, phenomenal tool, but I'm looking at that in a silo to say, all right, is this driver having a lot of harsh braking or a lot of overspeeds or a lot of lane departures? Okay, in that context, maybe I go and talk about harsh braking, overspeed, or lane departure, right? But then I also have the FMCSA over here, and it is looking at historical, when my driver got caught for inspection, violation, citation, right? I have, information about past accidents and crashes or maybe incidents over here in my risk management system. I have my own cursory knowledge and industry experience to say, hey, this driver who is a P&D driver in New Jersey, I need to look at them differently than a line haul or over the road driver in Nebraska, right? And so I'm kind of like trying to add my own context to that. So that's a lot to do, and that's a lot to try to manage as a human being, as a safety professional, especially when you add in dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of drivers to look at. So now what can predictive analytics do to help solve this problem? Again, we have a pool of behavior that if we can tie all those things together, tie together the FMCSA, the hours of service, the camera events, the driver demographic, the accidents and claims, pool all that together. And then if we have enough data historically to say, hey, I know that when a driver has this profile and does these specific things, it leads to these crashes. I have that data. I know that, right? And so predictive analytics or machine learning essentially says, hey, I can take all those leading indicators and find those specific patterns. And there's going to be a lot of different patterns and nuance in that. And then I can correlate that to actual accidents that happen. So now when your drivers come through the same predictive model, I can flag them quickly and highlight to you, safety manager, which ones are most at risk to get into a crash over the next few weeks. And then you can take that data and information. And now there's technology and tools to be able to even help you understand why that driver has the risk, what behavioral categories are driving most of that risk. So now, again, as a safety manager, I can see the who, which drivers are most at risk, the why, the behaviors that are actually driving that risk. So now I can take my precious and non-infinite time,
Right.
because there's never enough time in the day. I can
Absolutely.
take my time and focus it on the drivers who need it most, with targeted coaching that's specific and tailored to the behaviors that are driving most of the risk.
And kind of taking that back the other way, Hayden, for someone like me who goes into a courtroom
Yeah.
with one of your customers and just instead of having a subjective opinion of someone who's been in the industry 112,000 years or 112 years and says, this is what I think the standard of care is, we've teed them up with, this is the objective data based upon the risk, and this is why we acted to the standard of care based upon the data historical machine learning that we've done. That be fair?
Yeah, that's super fair. And I think the other thing that I think is even more, because we get asked a lot by fleets and say, hey, if I adopt this type of technology, is that opening me up for more litigation? Is that making it more risky? And honestly, the answer is no, because guys, you have this data. It's there. You know what I mean? Like it's not like the machine learning or the predictive analytics is now creating new underlying data. It's taking the data that's already existing, quite frankly, that the plaintiff's attorneys are already getting and using against us, to then have a more positive, proactive, and predictive stance and story versus getting into court after a crash already happens, having the plaintiff's attorney get the hours of service, get the telematics, get the camera data, get the FMCSA, pull it together themselves, and then have them craft their own narrative about how negligent you are. You don't look at your drivers. You don't look at this. This driver had 4 speeding alerts. Obviously, they were incredibly risky. Why didn't you take them off the road? It's like, well, guys, like four speeding alerts in a 2-month period for a driver in this area that's not out of the norm. Like that's not risky. Guys, like giving that context and being able to understand and have a foundational platform that allows you and your team to execute on your safety practices and protocols is so important.
You rebut the plaintiff attorney with the objective evidence, say, hey, look, we look at these safety alerts and let's show you what the data is on it. And you're exactly right, Hayden. In terms of the trucking company's concern about more data, I call it the discovery fallacy. Like you say, the data's there. Either you're going to write your narrative or you're going to defer to the other side, and it's not going to be a pretty picture on that.
Spot on. Spot on.
Now applying AI to what we do with machine learning, how do you do that, or where does that come into the picture, Hayden?
Yeah, so AI. So again, there's several different like facets of AI that come into play. Obviously, one of the ones that has been pretty pervasive in our industry over the last 3 to 4 years is AI as it comes to the cameras, for example. So what that's doing, that is essentially taking video, inward-facing video, or even outward-facing video, but a lot of it's applied to the inward-facing video, and looking at, analyzing, and determining specific factors that are happening in real time based on the pictures that the camera is creating. So if your driver is, it identifies the driver's face, and if it starts to sag and droop, it knows based on historical context that, hey, this driver is likely drowsy, right? Could it just be that the driver has a beard and they're like looking around at their mirrors? Sure. That's where, so the accuracy comes in and the importance, again, like the generative AI and some of the different AI factors. It's, again, based on human identification and highlighting what is or isn't real, or isn't the case. And so there's some obviously fine tuning there. But one of the ones that we see now that's really coming into the space is this generative AI side of the equation. And that's really around, again, your ChatGPTs and your Geminis. And where this has started to truly blossom in trucking and transportation is really making the teams more effective and efficient, right? We've seen companies start to use generative AI to create new branded training for their drivers, create videos in mass and quickly, right? Again, do you need to be very, very careful and go in and edit and change? Yes, but it's a great place to start and a great place to kind of get things rolling. Or even just say, hey, ChatGPT, help me to create a script for a DOT training for hazmat certification. And then it could create something that, again, it's looking across the vast pool of the internet and kind of helping to curate the things that are already there, but it is a method or a tool to speed up that process. Or, hey, Jim and I, help me, help me create a coaching plan. I have a meeting with a driver. They've been having issues with overspeed, but help me make it to where it's not punitive, that it feels like we're on the same side of the table, and I just want to make sure that they get home safe every night. You hit enter, and then it spits out a solid plan, right? And again, these are tools that we should definitely double check
Right.
and make sure
Absolutely.
that we're putting our eyes on it. But again, when you talk about a driver manager, for example, who is not used to having safety conversations,
Right.
their focus has been getting freight from point A to point B, making sure wheels are turning, and doing so profitably. Great. Well, now fleets are really pushing this concept of operationalizing safety, which is incredibly important. And if fleets aren't doing it, they're behind the eight ball. And we've seen some of the best fleets in the country really start to focus on operations teams leading the way with safety conversations, because those frontline driver managers or dispatchers, they're the ones that have the best relationships with the drivers. They're the ones that have the daily conversations with them. And so they're the best ones to be able to take on some of those initial early conversations of, hey man, saw that you had a couple overspeeds yesterday. Let's really kind of dial that back. We want to make sure you're getting home safe. Yes, getting there on time is important, but not at the risk of your life, right? So like that goes a whole lot better from a conversation standpoint than if, hey, this is this is safety calling in. I know we haven't spoken in 3 months, but you need to slow down,
Yeah.
right? Like, so
Yeah.
knowing that context, right? Giving those driver managers or operations team members a tool to better or more effectively curate what they want to say. It helps alleviate a lot of anxiety, and knowing that they don't have time to sit there and scrutinize every single word in their own mind and like create something out of the blue. Though these kinds of generative tools can be very helpful in streamlining the kind of the day-to-day tasks that need to get done and helping them be more efficient in their tasks.
One of the problems I think a lot of companies have, and I find this, after the accident, a lot of times they don't even know what data they have or what's coming off of their equipment.
Yeah.
In terms of the machine learning, Hayden, what's one of the keys in terms of, they have all these disparate sources. What
Yeah.
needs done or what's vital in terms of that?
That's a fantastic question, because again, like we can talk about machine learning and predictive analytics, we can talk about AI and all these different pieces, but really to use those tools most effectively, you have to have a base foundation of safety system and platform. And ultimately, to get that base foundation, you've got to integrate and tie in all those disparate systems that you just talked about. And so this is one that when we talk to fleets is probably, it's not a flashy or sexy type of conversation. It's not the AI predictive analytics, but it comes down to one of the most important things fleets need is just consistent visibility. You've got to be able to tie in your ELD to your camera, to the FMCSA portal, to the accidents, to the claims, to the driver dispatch, to all these different driver demographic, like your fleet's hierarchy. All of that needs to come together in a single place. So you don't have to swivel chair back and forth to all these different systems. But two, you need to be able to leverage that data in order to effectively use some of those other AI tools.
Right.
So predictive analytics is a great example, right? Like, we have, for example, 40 billion miles of driver data historically, over 500,000 individual unique crashes, and all that's like super helpful for building that initial predictive model. But for us to be able to work with any of our customers, we have to be able to go in and integrate and tie in and connect all those disparate systems at their fleet, so that we can then compare their individual drivers' data to that pool of historical information to then make those accurate predictions, right? So both of those things, you need that large historical data pool, but also the day-to-day integrated data of what's coming across your systems internally to make those types of tools work effectively.
Now, you get all this and you at Idelic process it. What's been your experience in terms of how a jury receives this? What it signals to a jury in terms of, the company using this, doing the predictive analytics, the AI, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, again, Doug, you're in the trenches. You're on the front line. You see this every single day. And the biggest thing that plaintiffs' attorneys are trying to do, from what I've seen with our customers as well, is they're trying to say you had a standard, you had a policy, you had a process written down, whether it's in your handbook, and then you didn't follow through with it. And you weren't being proactive. You put revenue dollars instead of ahead of lives, right? Like those,
Right.
that's the kind of story that they're trying to paint. So when it comes to what this signals to a jury, you're
Hmm.
saying, no, no, no,
Yeah.
I have spent an inordinate amount of time and resources, both financial and personnel, to be able to, one, leverage a platform that integrates and ties in all my data, gives me the visibility. We have process and procedure that we've now tied to it. We have alerts, notifications when that process isn't being followed. We're leveraging the latest technology and predictive analytics, even some of the AI pieces, to be able to allow us to be proactive and predictive, allow us to be more efficient with our time. We've done all the things. There
Yeah.
is zero chance that you can come to us and say, we're not trying.
Yeah.
And I
And I think
think
that's
that's one of the biggest things. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, that's a big point. A key thing because we talk about the reptile theory and things. What they're trying to do with the company is to show there's a systemic failure,
Yeah.
and what the machine learning and what you provide does is like you may disagree with what we do, but you can't disagree with we this is our thoughts, this is what we have, and this is what the data shows. And so you can be subjectively critical, but here we are driven by the data of the
Yeah.
predictive analytics to avoid those crashes that we learn of through the predictive analysis on that.
Bingo. Well,
Yeah.
and then too, like when you have that systematic approach, right? You can ensure that your internal needs and policies are blended with this proactive predictive approach because there are for example, I'll give you a good example. We have a customer who came to us a while back and said, "Hey, I appreciate this this philosophical change in we want to be more broad looking. We want to focus on overarching behaviors. We want to focus on tying all these different systems together and looking at the overarching view of a driver's risk, and that's super super important, and that's we're moving towards that as well. However, we also know that inside of our policy, we know that these 7 things are incredibly important, and we've listed these 7 things that anytime they come across our desk, we have to coach every single time. Right now,
Right.
there's thousands of other data points that don't necessarily get looked at with that level of scrutiny. And that's where the integrated data, the predictive analytics, all that comes into play to take the entirety of that data into account and then leverage that to find, that top echelon of drivers that are most at risk. But hey, whether the driver is super safe and just having a bad day, whether the driver is, at risk, doesn't matter. If they're exhibiting these 7 things, right, that's what we care about. And they got to coach every single time. How can you help us with that?
Right.
And in those instances, right, we actually went in and created some additional tooling within our platform to be able to say, you know what, you're exactly right. There are multiple facets of this where you need to be able to adhere to your policy, even if it is coaching single one-off events, right? Again, we know philosophically, like it is more important to look at the entire picture and coach in mass on, this on if a driver, not just every single individual event, but hey, this driver had a couple of speeding alerts here from their camera, out in a FMCSA, speeding citation, and maybe minor backing incident where speed was a factor, right? We all know
Yeah.
intuitively that it's important to tie all of those events together and then coach holistically on
Right.
speed management, for example.
Yeah.
But if you have a policy, you got to adhere to your policy. And so being able to allow for and have tooling within your fleet to say, hey, let's make it easier to coach on these one-off events in this curated way. So again, tying all these different things, bringing them into a single dashboard, using your hierarchy within your fleet to feed that out to each of your individual managers based on which drivers that they oversee, having all the tooling and notifications to highlight when things are going overdue, or if a manager isn't up to speed on completing all their tasks. Like that type of base level system is super important. Is it using or leveraging AI or machine learning in those types of tools? No, but is that still super critical to making sure that you are helping to protect against these larger nuclear verdicts? Absolutely. So I think there's still this kind of base level foundation that needs to happen, where you're tying the data together, you're creating or leveraging external tools to ensure that your policies are getting done. And then you add on that machine learning predictive analytics or that AI tooling on top of that. And now you're going above and beyond that standard of care.
Yes.
And from a protection against that nuclear verdict side, man, like it is very, very hard to dispute.
Absolutely. Hayden Cardiff, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate the insight. Thank you.
Absolutely.